Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamima, and these are today's top stories. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says he will not vote for Free Patriotic Movement founder MP Michel Aoun in the upcoming parliamentary session to elect a new president. Lebanese officials, including former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, commemorate the 4th anniversary of the assassination of Police Intelligence Chief Brigadier General Wissam al-Hassan. And fighting to recapture Mosul enters a third day as coalition forces focus efforts on the Iraqi town of Hamdaniya. Lebanese lawmakers have gathered for a rare legislative session, the first in nearly a year due to the country's long-standing political deadlock, in a bid to pass urgent draft laws. The session, which was scheduled by Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri a day earlier, has broached a draft electoral law fulfilling a long-standing demand of the Free Patriotic Movement and the Lebanese forces. The legislative body was expected to hold morning and evening sessions to go over and approve the 21 draft law agenda, which also includes a number of important financial draft laws that, which if left unapproved, could land Lebanon on financial blacklists. MPs passed 5 of those draft laws in the early hours of the session, with reservations made by the Lebanese forces, the FPM and Hezbollah. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says he will not vote for Free Patriotic Movement founder MP Michel Aoun in the upcoming parliamentary session to elect a new president, although he said he will congratulate him if he wins. Berri, who spoke prior to the legislative meeting, dismissed claims he was impeding efforts to fill the country's top post, which has been vacant since Michel Sleiman's tenure ended in May of 2014. Lawmakers have failed 45 times to elect a new head of state due to an ongoing boycott by the FPM and its allies, including Hezbollah. Lebanese officials have commemorated the 4th anniversary of the assassination of Police Intelligence Chief Brigadier General Wissam al-Hassan. Future Movement Chief Saad Hariri said, quote, "During this painful anniversary, we remember with sorrow the loss of such an important security figure, which carried out many important achievements in pursuing fugitives, uncovering Israeli spy networks, and confronting terrorist organizations." For his part, Lebanese forces leader Samir Jaja said Hassan will never be forgotten. On Tuesday, resigned Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi said he hoped Hassan's blood was not spilled in vain, and said he asked about the investigation into his assassination 4 years after his murder. Other officials also visited Hassan's grave, located next to those of other assassinated politicians outside the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque in downtown Beirut. Just a reminder that Hassan, who was in charge of the ISF's information branch at the time of his assassination, was killed in a car bomb in Beirut's Ashrafiyya district on October 19, 2012. The UN has dashed hopes that a prospective ceasefire in East Aleppo could provide humanitarian relief for besieged civilians, saying all sides needed to back an extended truce before aid convoys could roll. A plan to pause fighting for 8 hours in rebel-held East Aleppo has been announced by Assad regime ally Russia, with no word from Damascus that it intends to honor the deal. The UN said it needed assurances from all parties before anything meaningful could be done. It also said it needed a minimum of 48 hours, stressing that Russia's time-limited deal would not be sufficient for UN teams to mobilize. Aside from getting desperately needed supplies to East Aleppo's estimated 250,000 civilians, the UN also wants to evacuate hundreds of people in urgent need of medical care. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said at least 1 million Syrians could flee to Turkey if there is an exodus from the city of Aleppo, the rebel-held east of which is currently under siege from Syrian and Russian forces. In a speech at the presidential palace, Erdogan said he discussed with Russian President Vladimir Putin an agreement on removing from Aleppo the group formerly known as Nusra Front and now called Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. An Iranian court sentences an Iranian-American businessman and his father to 10 years in prison on charges of cooperating with the U.S. That's coming up next. Stay with me. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. Fighting has entered the third day as coalition forces focused efforts on the town of Hamdaniya as they march towards Mosul, the second largest Iraqi city and the last major ISIL stronghold in the country. Explosives and booby traps laid down by ISIL slowed down the Iraqi offensive in recent days, despite air support from the U.S.-led coalition. ISIL snipers posed danger to Iraqi forces trying to advance towards Mosul. As the coalition airstrikes pounded Hamdaniya, the Iraqi army said that it had to destroy 5 cars being driven by ISIL suicide bombers during their advance. Palestinian leaders have welcomed a decision by the UN Cultural Agency to adopt a resolution on occupied East Jerusalem that sharply criticizes Israeli policies around the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, while Israel says it ignores Jewish ties to the key holy site. A spokesman for Paris-based UNESCO said the resolution, which caused Israel to suspend its cooperation with the agency, was adopted without a new vote after being approved at the committee stage last week. Palestine's deputy ambassador to UNESCO, Munir Anastas, told reporters the resolution reminds Israel that they are the occupying power in East Jerusalem, and it asked them to stop all their violations, including archaeological excavations around religious sites. The UNESCO resolution also condemned Israel for restricting Muslim access to the site and for aggression by Israeli police and soldiers, while also recognizing Israel as the occupying power. Ecuador's government has acknowledged it had partly restricted internet access for Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who has lived in the South American country's UK embassy since mid-2012. WikiLeaks said Assange lost connectivity on Sunday, sparking speculation that Ecuador might have been pressured by the United States due to the group's publication of hacked material linked to U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Ecuador's government said WikiLeaks' decision to publish documents affecting the U.S. election was entirely its own responsibility, and the country did not want to meddle in election processes or favor any candidate. The United States, however, denied charges from WikiLeaks that Washington asked Ecuador to cut Assange's internet connection. Now for some news in Asia, a rally to protest against U.S. troops in the Philippines has turned violent as a police van rammed into activists gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Manila. At least 3 demonstrators were reportedly injured. Police also used water cannon and tear gas to disperse about 1,000 anti-U.S. protesters. Several other activists were injured in subsequent clashes with police. Police said activists did not have a permit to protest and broke the windscreen of a police vehicle, which prompted police to retaliate. Dozens of pro-Beijing politicians have staged a walkout from the Hong Kong legislature to stall the swearing-in of 2 pro-independence legislators in the Chinese-administered city. The topic of independence has long been taboo in the former British colony, now governed under the one country, two systems principle since its return to China in 1997. The government failed in an unprecedented legal attempt on Tuesday to halt the swearing-in of the 2. The politicians marched out of the legislative chamber, leaving Chinese and Hong Kong flags in their place to deprive it of a quorum. It is unclear when swearing-in will take place. Moving on to Africa, the main opposition party of the Democratic Republic of Congo has strongly rejected a decision to push back its year's election to April 2018, calling it a flagrant violation of the constitution. The postponement of the vote, which hands President Joseph Kabila more than a year of extra time in office, was approved by the country's constitutional court on Monday, following talks between the ruling coalition and smaller parties. Most opposition forces, however, boycotted the national dialogue and called for a nationwide general strike to put pressure on Kabila. An Iranian court has sentenced an Iranian-American businessman and his elderly father to 10 years in prison on charges of cooperating with the U.S. Iranian media reported that the pair was among a group of 6 who were sentenced for spying in Iran. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in October 2015 detained Siamak Namazi, a businessman in his mid-40s with dual U.S.-Iranian citizenship, while he was visiting family in Tehran. The IRGC in February arrested his 80-year-old father, Bakir Namazi, a former Iranian provincial governor and former UNICEF official who is also who also has dual citizenship. U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesman Mark Toner said the Namazis had been unjustly detained in Iran and called for their immediate release.
We join recent calls by international organizations and UN human rights experts for the immediate release of all U.S. citizens unjustly detained in Iran, including Samyak and Bakir Namazi, so that they can return to their families. We also respectfully underscore the importance of Iran cooperating with the United States to determine the whereabouts of Mr. Robert Levinson, who went missing on Iran's Kish Island in March 2007. And as President Obama stated last January, we will not rest until the Levinson family is whole again.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri says he will not vote for Free Patriotic Movement founder MP Michel Aoun in the upcoming parliamentary session to elect a new president. Lebanese officials, including former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, commemorate the 4th anniversary of the assassination of Police Intelligence Chief Brigadier General Wissam al-Hassan. And fighting to recapture Mosul enters a 3rd day as coalition forces focus efforts on the town of Hamdaniya. Those are your top stories for this Wednesday. I'm Linda Tamimna. Thank you all for watching.